What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling here on the YouTubes, and we got a lot of wrestling stuff to talk about today. New Japan's big Tokyo Dome show is coming up this weekend. Kind of, I don't know, kind of a lukewarm reception coming to it, but I do feel, and I have heard that the crowd will be okay for this show. I've been really concerned about, them going to Tokyo Dome and having a 5 or 6 match card. Now, of course, you've got the Yano's King of Pro Wrestling Rambo, what they call it, their version of the Royal Rumble, essentially, for the King of Pro Wrestling trophy, which is kind of like the preliminary match. But the main matches I'm looking forward to at this Tokyo Dome show, of course, are the main event, Shingo Takagi defending the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship against Kota Ibushi. I think that's going to be a fantastic match. I also think the surprise of the night might be Okada and Jeff Cobb. This is probably the most important match in Jeff Cobb's career so far as Major League Wrestling companies, because he was a big star obviously on Lucha Underground, and he's been a big star in a lot of the other promotions, but the big three are still at this point in time in history. It's AEW, WWE, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Those are the three biggest wrestling companies in the world right now, along with I would say AAA and CMLL. So Cobb having a performance here with a guy who's arguably one of the greatest wrestlers of this generation. I definitely think the greatest champion period in the 2010s, Kazuchika Okada. I think it's a big spot for him, and I think he could pull it out. Some of the other matches on the card are interesting. Of course, I will be on here after the event. We will be doing a review after the event. I might even do it live. I'm debating on that, depending on how tired I am after the show goes off the air, but we'll see about that. But if I'm not going to do a live review, we'll be doing definitely a review the next day of the Wrestle Grand Slam show in Tokyo Dome. On to WWE news. Now, some of you guys know I watched Money in the Bank, and I was highly impressed. It's the most enjoyment I've gotten out of a WWE pay-per-view, like from start to finish in a long time. Like, again, I said the first night of WrestleMania this year was good. There were a couple shows last year that were okay, but it's been a long time since I watched from start to finish. Even actually beyond that, the pre-show match I like with the Usos and the Mysterios. The whole show was a really good wrestling show, which I enjoyed. And when you have a really good wrestling show with WWE's production quality, it makes the production quality worth it. And it's not that I'm just here for watching special effects. There's actually substance to the show, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, the special ending with John Cena. So, like many people, I checked out some of what was going on Raw. Now, I didn't watch Raw live on the USA Network on Monday, but I did watch it on YouTube. So I checked out the clips from YouTube, and as I feared, they went right back to the things that they were known for doing on the weekly shows, which at this point, again, I think it's probably best for me to just watch the pay-per-views and not worry about the weekly TV shows, because the weekly TV shows tend to do things that don't make any sense. In particular this week, and a lot of fans seem to be really upset about this, the burial, and I'm going to use that term in this case, of NXT. Keith Lee made his long-awaited return to WWE. He's been gone for, 7 months, 8 months, whatever it's been. He comes in and gets a match against Bobby Lashley and loses. Karrion Kross, NXT champion, comes up to the main roster and goes up against Jeff Hardy and loses. And not loses in a, he should have won the match. Loses in they've just flat out lost the match. For Keith Lee, it's supposed to be a bigger thing, and I've seen that the writers for WWE say, this is just the start of bigger things for them, especially Karrion Kross. The only time I remember anybody losing their first match coming up from NXT to the main roster and being successful from then on was nobody, because the few people that have come up from NXT and have been successful, and I'll take in the case several years ago, NXT champion at the time, Kevin Owens, came up to the main roster and beat John Cena on the main roster. So that helped. That's why KO is still up there. If KO had lost that match and then went right back to NXT, people would, when he came back, would be like, but Kevin Owens has a legitimate pin victory over John Cena when John Cena was doing the great thing about trying to give back to some of the newer stars on WWE's roster. That's not what we're seeing here with Karrion Kross. Karrion Kross, who's probably one of the hottest stars coming out of NXT. He was a hot star going into NXT. I mean, Jeff Hardy's not bad to lose against Jeff Hardy, but it's bad to lose in your first match on the card. You don't, on the main roster, you don't do that. You don't debut star. This is why they can't make any stars out of a lot of these NXT guys. And anyone they bring up to the main roster and they have them lose the first match, I can't think of one of them off the top of my head who went on to be anything special. So Raw was a disappointment from what I saw, even the clips I saw on YouTube, and I watched about 4 of them. I was like, because I saw it was a lot of stuff that wasn't even on the pay-per-view. You know, they were doing some angle with Sheamus, and there's a couple other things. And I've heard that these matches are recycled matches, that they've done the matches I saw on the YouTube clips. This is like the 3rd or 4th rematch for some of these matches. The story is inconsistent. I'm like, what happened to what y'all did at Money in the Bank? Just do more of that. Just do more of that. Why are you giving me this stuff? So I don't know. We're gonna go back to, I'm probably not gonna watch WWE again, as far as actually sitting down and watching the full show until SummerSlam, which in their defense, what they started at Money in the Bank, I like the storylines that they're building. I'm not too sure about Bobby Lashley and Goldberg. It's gonna be a 4-minute match. But Roman Reigns and John Cena, that should be good. Again, I don't think the match is going to be particularly great as far as a wrestling match, but the spectacle of the match should be amazing. So that's what we're going to watch it for, and that's the next thing I'm looking forward to in the WWE universe. But the big thing that came up Wednesday into today is this big rumor that not only is Brian Danielson, apparently some people say he's already signed, some people said he hasn't signed, but the signs and the rumors and the scuttlebutt seems very strong that Brian Danielson will be the next big signee for AEW, possibly making his debut at Arthur Ashe Stadium. Again, that's a rumor. There's nothing confirmed. AEW hasn't said anything. Brian Danielson hasn't said anything, but he's not the only one. CM Punk apparently has been in talks at least with AEW about making his return after 7 years since the Raw after the Royal Rumble in 2014. I think that was the last time he was at a WWE show. I think his last in-ring performance was him going over the top rope in the Royal Rumble 2014. It's crazy to think it's been that long. Punk came back. Of course, he did the backstage show on Fox Sports that didn't go anywhere. Of course, he had his brief stint in the mixed martial arts world, and he didn't really quite succeed there. But although it's to be noted that somebody did point out recently that actually Punk did win a fight or as a draw, because I think his last mixed martial arts opponent was post the match disqualified because they found out that they had been using some enhancements, so they were disqualified. Thus Punk won the fight, I guess. It doesn't matter. Punk's MMA career is done with, and Punk is, I think he's a year younger than I am, or we're the same age, because we share the same birthday. So I know at my age, I'm a little bit tired and old and cranky. So I don't know about CM Punk having not been in ring shape for 7 years, climbing back into the ring and going up against some of these guys that got in AEW. But there are some benefits definitely to Punk and Danielson heading to All Elite Wrestling. I don't think it's going to be a sea change, but I think it'll be a benchmark that we can point back to in a couple years if AEW continues on the ascension that it's on. And before the WWE sweaties start going, whatever you say, it's very simple. You can look at WWE's audience over the last couple years, and it's the trend, even though the ratings go up and down, but the trend of viewership has been on a downward slide, whereas AEW's trend, even though it goes up and down some weeks, some months, it's generally an upward trend. So the momentum is behind AEW. WWE seems like they've kind of flattened out right now. Although I do think, given the fact that everybody was going crazy again about the ratings for Monday Night Raw, and John Cena came back, I checked the ratings out. I was like, oh, what's a 1.9? You guys are going crazy about a 1.9? WWE Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw. 1.9 million viewers. And that's a success. Again, I'm not big on the numbers and anything, but for WWE sweaties to be jumping up and down about that, again, I'm old school, man. Some of the Sunday Night Heat got bigger ratings than that back in the day. So I don't know, man. It is what it is. But the point of reason I bring up the viewership for WWE Monday Night Raw is that AEW is not that far behind. And I said this before. It takes one really hot angle for AEW to close that gap with WWE's main roster shows. You're bringing in CM Punk, and immediately, and I've heard other people talk about this instantly. They were like, CM Punk and MJF. Give me a promo. Give me a 5-minute promo segment with CM Punk and MJF just going at each other. That's get all day. Give me that. Brian Danielson, of course, his big thing, which just goes back to the whole thing with Nick Khan and WWE trying to make an exclusive deal with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Obviously, that didn't work. We just saw Lance Archer win the IWGP US Championship from Jon Moxley on AEW television as the main event of the show. So clearly, the relationship between New Japan and AEW is pretty strong, and this exclusive thing with WWE is not going to happen. A lot of people are citing that as being the reason they think that Brian Danielson is absolutely going to AEW, because much like Jon Moxley, and much like pretty much almost any star in AEW, they have an opportunity, if Danielson goes there, for Danielson to not only work in AEW, obviously, but to fulfill his dream of going over to New Japan. Now, again, New Japan Pro Wrestling right now is not the New Japan Pro Wrestling we had from 2 years ago. But by the time all this gets settled, and by the time Brian Danielson, it's going to be hard to switch that name back now. But as soon as Brian Danielson gets settled in with AEW, hopefully the pandemic thing will be done, and we might, the idea of seeing Brian Danielson at Wrestle Kingdom coming up in January just kind of blows my mind. So I'm excited to see that. And again, all the matchups that Danielson can have, obviously Kenny Omega, obviously a match for everybody on AEW's roster, most of those people, Brian Danielson has not wrestled. A lot of people are going to complain about, oh, it's another WWE guy. But neither one of these WWE guys, Daniel Bryan or CM Punk, wrestled most of the WWE guys that have gone to AEW. So they're all fresh matchups, in my opinion. And even though it's a big deal, and I do think it is going to be a flashpoint in the future for whatever happens with AEW, whether or not it's the beginning of the end or the beginning of the beginning, I think what people need to keep in perspective is that it's not going to be a seat-changing thing. This is not going to be a seat changer. It's going to pop a rating. They're probably going to get huge ratings if CM Punk and Brian Danielson wind up in AEW, especially at the Arthur Ashe show and at All Out, obviously, which would be the two places people think they're going to show up at. But it's not going to flip the script. Now, keep in mind, let's go back to 1994. Hulk Hogan, mind you, probably arguably the biggest name in the history of wrestling. He went to WCW in 1994, the summer of 94. It wasn't until 96 that WCW completely started surpassing the WWF in viewership, significance, and rating. And it took 2 years. So I don't think CM Punk and Brian Danielson, as big as stars as they are to this current generation, if Hulk Hogan couldn't do it back in the 90s, I don't think they're going to be the sea change. But I think they are going to be the start, much like Hogan and Savage were back in 94 for WCW. It could be the same thing here with CM Punk and Danielson and coming to AEW in 2021, that we might be seeing the beginning of that increase. And again, even though it wasn't an overnight sea change, about a year later, Monday Nitro started and the numbers were comparable with that of WWF. This might lead to something that I might talk about in another video, which is WWE's kind of isolationist, us against the world policy. Well, the world, in this case being the pro wrestling world, finally has smartened up, and these guys are all starting to work together, with Tony Khan and AEW kind of being that conduit and flagship. They're gonna be like, we've got the audience, so NWA, Impact, New Japan, you guys want to come in and showcase some of your guys, and then maybe some of our fans will peel off and watch some of your stuff, but we're gonna try to be this kind of destination wrestling spot where the wrestling community watches. And a lot of people have always said, why doesn't AEW should cater to the casual fan? No, AEW should do what AEW is doing. AEW is not trying to outclass WWE and become this pop culture thing. AEW, as stated by Cody and by Tony Khan and the Bucks and Kenny Omega and on down the line, they said the point of the company was to have a pro wrestling company that was for wrestling fans. Not a wrestling company that was trying to appeal to people for things besides wrestling and to get them to watch a wrestling show. No, they wanted to try to make a wrestling show popular again. And so far, they've done a pretty good job of that. Not anywhere near the levels where it used to be, but none of wrestling is, and most TV isn't. But for them to be able to accomplish what they've accomplished now, they can kick it up another notch and keep gaining another 100,000 viewers here and another 100,000 viewers here, another 100,000 viewers there. 2016, the seeds were planted for this. And each year we're going to see something grow out of the seeds that were planted back in 2016. That plant is getting kind of big now. and I'm excited to see what other fruit is going to come out of this plan. Gardening analogies aside, I want to know what you guys think about this. Do you think that Brian Danielson or CM Punk will be heading to All Elite Wrestling? Do you think it's going to be a significant sea change? What did you think about this episode of Monday Night Raw this week? Was Money in the Bank an anomaly, and they're just going to go back to their usual nonsense that they usually do, disappointing half of the wrestling audience? And I'll be interested in knowing, what do you think is going to happen this weekend at the Grand Slam event from Tokyo Dome from New Japan Pro Wrestling? Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Until then, I will see you guys for more news, rumors, and commentary right here on the Rantin Review. Have a good day.